Arya, come here.
Mom, stop. Caroline was there when you weren't.
You are not taking Arya home today. Arya will stay with Caroline while the family review continues.
Walk away from those records, Brooke.
Imagine losing 6 years, then finding your accuser raising your child. What they didn't know was one terminal code still remembered the truth.
A black mother walked out of an Ohio prison after 6 years for a crime she did not commit. Her 12-year-old daughter was waiting outside the gate, but she was not waiting alone. The woman holding Arya Wilson's hand was Caroline Perkins, Brooke's former best friend, and the prosecution witness whose testimony had helped send Brooke to prison. Caroline had raised Arya for the last 3 years. She knew her school schedule, her medical routine, and the medication she carried for asthma. Legally, she was now Arya's guardian. And before that cold November day was over, Brooke would learn something worse than the word guardian. Proving her innocence would not automatically bring her daughter home. She would have 60 days to find work, secure an apartment, complete a parenting program, and convince the county that she could become a full-time mother again. But Brooke did not yet know that Caroline had kept part of the truth about the night of the crime hidden for 6 years. At 9:06 on a November morning, the steel door at the Ohio Women's Correctional Facility gave a hard mechanical buzz and opened. Brooke Wilson stepped outside carrying 6 years in a clear plastic property bag. Inside were a toothbrush, a state identification card, a black hair tie stretched almost useless, 2 folded letters she had read until the creases began to split, and $84 from prison work assignments. The cold entered through the thin release coat and caught in her lungs. The sky over northeastern Ohio was the flat gray that came before snow. Brooke had rehearsed this moment for 2,191 nights. In every version, her daughter ran to her. In none of those versions was another woman holding Arya's hand. Arya stood at the edge of the visitor parking lot in a blue winter coat. She was 12 now, tall enough that Brooke had to correct the child she had carried in her mind. Her cheeks had lost their little girl roundness. Her hair was pulled into 2 neat twists, and a silver bracelet circled her wrist, the same bracelet Brooke had fastened there 1 week before the arrest. Brooke took 1 step. Then she saw Caroline beside her. Caroline had once sat at Brooke's kitchen table after late shifts, decorated birthday cupcakes, and let 6-year-old Arya sleep across her lap. She had also been the prosecution's key witness, telling the court she saw Brooke at the Lakeview accounting computer on the night money disappeared. Brooke's voice sounded rough from disuse. "Let go of my daughter's hand." Caroline's fingers loosened immediately. Arya did not let go. She tightened her grip and moved half a step in front of Caroline. "Mom, don't," she said. "She took care of me." Brooke had prepared for hesitation. She had prepared for Arya not recognizing her, for a stiff hug, even for silence. She had not prepared for her child to protect Caroline from her. "Arya," Brooke said, "come here, baby." Arya looked back at Caroline first. It was quick, almost automatic. Then she crossed the parking lot. Brooke set down the property bag and crouched. When she pulled Arya close, the girl smelled like strawberry shampoo and cold air. Brooke had never bought that shampoo. Arya's arms came around her, but not all at once. One hand rested between Brooke's shoulders while the other stayed near her chest, as if she had not decided how much weight the moment could hold. "I missed you," Brooke whispered. "I missed you too." Caroline picked up the bag before the wind could push it across the pavement. "There's a blanket in the car. I thought she might be cold." "You don't have to tell me what she needs." Caroline stopped speaking. Arya's shoulders lifted with a small breath that sounded tight. Caroline noticed before Brooke did. She opened Arya's backpack, removed a pill container, checked her watch, and handed Arya 1 tablet with a bottle of water. The routine took less than 30 seconds. Brooke watched her daughter swallow. "What is that?" "My controller medicine," Arya said, "for asthma." Brooke stared at her. "You have asthma?" Arya's face changed. not embarrassment. Something more careful, the expression children used when they realized an adult had missed something important. It started when I was 9. 3 years. Brooke nodded once, because she could not trust her voice. Caroline looked as if she wanted to add something, then closed the backpack instead. It was the first time that day Brooke noticed her stopping herself. That afternoon, the three of them sat in the Cuyahoga County Child Services building. A caseworker named Darcy opened a thick file and placed a legal pad beside it. "Ms. Wilson, I want to be clear before we go through the paperwork. Aria will not leave with you today." "I'm her mother." "You are. Your parental rights were not terminated, but you have been incarcerated for 6 years, and Aria has an existing guardianship order." Darcy's tone was not cruel. It was practiced. The court approved a 60-day evaluation period. During that time, you'll need verified income, housing suitable for a child, and participation in a parenting reunification program. And until then, supervised visits twice a week to begin. We can expand them if the reports are positive. Brooke looked at Caroline. "Where is my daughter sleeping tonight?" Darcy turned one page. "With her legal guardian, Ms. Perkins." The words reached Brooke separately. "Legal guardian?" Caroline lowered her eyes. "For approximately 3 years," Darcy said. "Your mother cared for Aria during the first 3 years of your sentence. After your mother died, there were 2 foster placements. Neither was successful. Ms. Perkins applied for guardianship, completed the home study, and was approved." Brooke's chair scraped the floor. "You never put that in your letters." "I tried," Caroline said. "You wrote about school pictures. You wrote that she needed braces. You wrote that she made honor roll. You left out the part where a judge gave you my child. I didn't know how to say it without making everything worse. You found the words when the prosecutor asked about me." Caroline flinched, then glanced at the file in front of Darcy. Again, Brooke saw the same unfinished movement, the beginning of an answer that never came. Darcy moved a form between them. "I understand there's history here. Right now, I need signatures acknowledging the visit schedule." Brooke signed beneath instructions that called her the non-custodial parent. Outside, Caroline offered to drive her to a furnished 2-bedroom apartment on the east side. A non-profit connected to Caroline's home care company had leased it, and the first 3 months were covered. "No," Brooke said. "Please look at it before you decide." "I decided. You have 60 days. Housing approvals take time, and winter makes everything slower. I'm not building a home for Aria with something you bought me." Caroline gripped the steering wheel. "This isn't about buying you. It feels close enough." Brooke got out 2 blocks before the transitional residence because she did not want Caroline seeing exactly where she had landed. The residence was a dark 3-story house near East Cleveland, with salt crust on the steps and a failing buzzer. Brooke's room was barely wider than the narrow bed. There was a metal wardrobe, 1 plastic chair, and pale rectangles where old tape had pulled paint from the wall. Dinner smells from the shared kitchen settled into the hallway. The rules were taped inside the door. Curfew at 10, no visitors, no children anywhere in the residence, and a maximum stay of 8 weeks. Brooke read the last rule again. 8 weeks was 56 days. The county had given her 60 days to prove stable housing. Even if she stayed until the final permitted night, she would finish the evaluation without an address, and no caseworker would call a building that prohibited children appropriate housing for a 12-year-old. She sat on the bed and placed the clear bag on her knees. From between the letters, she removed her only photograph of Aria, 6 years old, front tooth missing, laughing at something outside the frame. The re-entry phone vibrated. A message had arrived from an unknown number. Aria wore the bracelet every day. She wouldn't let me put it away, even when the clasp broke. I had it repaired. I thought you should know. See. Brooke did not answer. She did not delete it either. When the hallway lights clicked off, she lay on top of the blanket and listened to pipes knocking inside the walls. She had 60 days on paper and 56 nights under this roof. By morning, one problem came before all the others. She needed a job immediately. Sleep did not come. Street headlights moved across the ceiling, and Brooke's mind returned to the night every attorney, officer, and juror believed they understood. 6 years earlier, she had worked as an accounting clerk at Lakeview Care Center on Cleveland's east side. She prepared resident statements, tracked payment plans, and followed up with insurers. Her mother lived in room 214 after a stroke. Almost half of Brooke's paycheck went back to Lakeview for that care. She watched every charge. A billing error could mean delaying the electric bill or Aria's winter boots. One evening, after the office had closed, Brooke opened her mother's monthly statement and found the same care fee posted twice. The duplicate was $1,140. She checked the service date, billing category, and payment reference. Everything matched. It might have been a mistake, but it was not one she could leave until morning. Brooke returned to Lakeview around 9:30 p.m. The lobby lights were off and the night shift corridors had been dimmed. Caroline was at the nurse's station completing medication notes. "What are you doing back here?" Caroline asked. "My mother's bill has a duplicate charge. I'm checking it before somebody processes the next batch." "There's coffee in the break room." "You made it?" "Yes." "Then I'd rather stay awake naturally." Caroline laughed. It was the last ordinary sound Brooke remembered from that night. In the accounting room, Brooke logged in under B. Wilson and found the $1,140 entry. The line was real, and it had not come from her workstation. Her terminal was T-01. The transaction log showed T-02. Lakeview had only 2 computers permitted to reach that part of the accounting system. T-01 sat in the shared office. T-02 was inside Director Stanley Fox's office, which remained locked when he was not present. Brooke wrote the terminal code on a scrap of paper. She considered forwarding a screenshot to her personal email, then stopped because the resident billing records contained protected information. She would ask Stanley in the morning. She logged out, waved to Caroline, and left at approximately 10:20. By noon the next day, the duplicate charge seemed small compared with the accusation waiting for her. An internal review had identified money missing from Lakeview's operating accounts. The transfers had been spread across 14 months. The total was $90,400. Every transaction appeared under Brooke's username. Stanley placed the audit summary on the conference table while 2 supervisors stood near the door. "I wish you had come to me," he said quietly. "You've worked here a long time." "I did come to you. I came in because my mother was charged twice. The refund is already in the system." "It wasn't last night." Stanley folded his hands. "The police will have questions." They arrested Brooke at home the next morning. Aria was at the kitchen table eating cereal. One officer agreed to put the handcuffs on outside the apartment, but Aria still saw the badge, the second officer, and her mother's coat being held open for a search. Brooke crouched beside her chair. "You're going to stay with Grandma." "Why?" "There's a mistake at work. I have to help fix it." "When are you coming back?" "Soon." Aria held her spoon in the air. The silver bracelet was loose on her wrist. She did not cry before the door closed. She simply watched. The trial lasted 4 days. Brooke admitted returning to Lakeview and using her credentials. The prosecutor displayed a corrected refund entry and asked why she needed to enter the building at night when the error had already been fixed. "It had not been fixed when I saw it," Brooke said. The scrap of paper with T-02 written on it was not listed among the belongings collected during her arrest. Her public defender requested electronic entry records. Lakeview responded that portions of the access log had been lost during system maintenance. Then Caroline testified. She swore to tell the truth and answered the prosecutor without looking at Brooke. "I saw her at the accounting computer around 9:30 that night. She was alone in the room." Every word was accurate. That made it difficult to attack. Caroline claimed neither that she saw a transfer nor that Brooke carried records out. She gave the jury one clean fact, and no one asked what happened before midnight. The state presented Brooke as an employee using her mother's care expenses as cover. Stanley testified that Brooke had broad accounting access and had never reported concerns about her credentials. The defense had no complete log, terminal report, or independent transaction data. When the judge announced the sentence, Brooke looked for her mother in the courtroom. Her doctor had advised against bringing her. Caroline had left before the decision. Brooke heard the judge mention institutional trust and vulnerable residents. Then she heard the length of the sentence and calculated how old Aria would be when it ended. For the first 3 years, Brooke's mother cared for Aria. Her letters included spelling tests, scraped knees, school pictures, and questions Aria did not always answer. During the 3rd winter, Brooke's mother died in her sleep. The facility offered to transport Brooke to the funeral in restraints. She refused because Aria would be there. For years, she questioned whether Aria had needed her beside the casket more than she needed protection from the sight of chains. After the funeral, Aria moved through 2 foster homes. The placements failed amid absences, sleepless nights, and a packed backpack beside Aria's bed. Eventually, Caroline applied for guardianship. One of Aria's letters said, "I live with Aunt Caroline now. Please, don't be mad." Brooke tore the letter into 4 pieces. 10 minutes later, she borrowed tape and put it back together. Near dawn in the transitional residence, Brooke sat up and stopped reviewing the case as a wounded defendant. She looked at it as an accountant. The final fraudulent transfer had been entered at 11:52 p.m. Brooke had left at about 10:20. Caroline's shift ended at midnight. She had seen Brooke arrive. She had seen Brooke leave. And somewhere between those 2 times, a transfer had been made under Brooke's name from a system Brooke no longer controlled. The question was no longer whether Caroline's testimony had been true. The question was what she had left out. Brooke dressed for the cold and put the re-entry employment list in her bag. She needed income for the custody evaluation. She also needed access to whatever remained of Lakeview's records. The 2 problems could not wait for each other. She had to build an approvable life while reconstructing the 92 minutes before the last transfer. A conviction entered every job interview before Brooke did. Her first promising appointment was with a shipping company downtown. The office manager gave her a sample reconciliation sheet and watched her identify 2 posting errors in less than 10 minutes. "You've done this recently?" he asked. "Not in an office, but you kept up with it." "I kept up with anything I could get." The interview moved well until the background form appeared. Brooke knew how quickly employers reduced a black woman with a financial conviction to 1 box. She checked yes and wrote a brief explanation. The manager read it, then set the form apart from the rest of the application. "I have to send this to corporate. You asked whether I could start Monday. I know what I asked." The rejection arrived by email that evening. It thanked her for her interest without mentioning the sample sheet. The next morning, a woman at the residence told Brooke about Blackwell Auto Repair on East 55th. The owner needed someone to organize his books and had already driven away 2 temporary clerks. Findlay Blackwell stood behind the service counter with grease worked into the lines of his hands. He did not ask for a resume. He placed a box of wrinkled receipts on the counter. 3 months, he said. 2 registers, 5 suppliers, and 1 mechanic who writes numbers like he's hiding from the government. Tell me whether I'm losing money. Brooke worked for 2 hours. She sorted receipts, matched parts invoices to jobs, and found that 1 register had been assigned the wrong device number in the bookkeeping software. The apparent shortages were payments posted to the other machine. Findlay looked from the totals to Brooke. 8 o'clock Monday. Pay isn't much. No health insurance. I'll be here at 7:50. For the first time in 6 years, someone trusted her near a cash drawer. On her first day, Brooke arrived before Findlay and wrote 4 dates on the back of an old invoice. The end of the resident's stay, the county's 60-day review, 10:20 p.m. and 11:52 p.m. The first 2 were deadlines. The last 2 were the space where her old life had been taken apart. Her first supervised visit with Aria took place in a family services room with a faded rainbow poster and toys meant for younger children. Darcy sat in the corner making notes. Brooke brought macaroni and cheese with brown sausage pieces, the meal Aria used to request for birthdays and good report cards. Aria ate 1 forkful. "It's good," she said. "I just don't eat much sausage now. Aunt Caroline makes it with broccoli." "Broccoli?" Brooke pushed a napkin toward her. "That sounds like something Caroline would do to macaroni." Aria smiled, then looked toward Darcy as if checking whether laughter was allowed. Conversation improved when she opened her school folder. She had scored 92 on a math test. Brooke studied the missed questions, pleased by the careful work. On the back was a signature line labeled "Parent or Guardian." Caroline Perkins's name had already been printed above it. "Teacher said both of you can sign," Aria said quickly. Brooke signed beneath Caroline's name. "Then both of us will." After the visit, Aria asked where Brooke lived. They walked 2 blocks to the transitional house because Brooke did not want to lie. Aria studied the dark exterior and read the rules visible through the glass entry door. "Can kids stay here?" "No, not even one night." "Not even one?" Aria nodded. "I have my own room at Aunt Caroline's." She was explaining a practical difference. Brooke heard it all week while balancing repair orders, riding 2 buses, and waiting for the shared kitchen. Every night after Findlay left, she searched public records for Lakeview. The care center had closed 2 years earlier. Its building had been sold. Its operating company had dissolved. A different organization had acquired some personnel and compliance files, but nobody could tell her where the original accounting server had gone. On the 4th night, she found an old equipment inventory attached to a licensing document. T01 was listed in accounting. T02 was listed under Executive Office, S. Fox. It could not reopen the case, but her memory had not invented the locked room. She printed 1 copy and folded it behind her pay stubs. At the next visit, Caroline arrived with Aria's backpack and a folder of medical forms. She handed the folder to Brooke, then kept 1 finger on it a moment too long. "Her doctor changed one of the instructions last spring," Caroline said. "The yellow page is the current plan." Brooke took it. "I can read." "I know." Caroline glanced toward Aria, then toward the county office doors. Her mouth opened, but what came out was smaller than whatever she had almost said. "Make sure Darcy gets a copy." Brooke watched her walk away. The old equipment inventory pressed against the pay stubs in her bag. By the end of the 2nd week, Darcy approved a 3-hour off-site visit. Brooke picked Aria up from school on Friday. Caroline handed over the backpack and started to speak. "Her medication." "I have the bag. There's something you need to know about the front pocket." Brooke turned away. "We'll be fine." At a diner near the school, Aria ordered pancakes and told Brooke about a classmate who pretended to faint whenever the teacher announced a quiz. Brooke folded a paper frog from the placemat, and Aria laughed when it jumped into the syrup. For 20 minutes, the distance between 6 and 12 seemed less fixed. Then Aria's laugh broke into a cough. She sat straighter. Another cough came with a thin whistle. "My inhaler." Brooke opened the backpack and emptied it onto the booth. Notebooks, pencil case, gloves, library book. The front pocket was empty. Aria pressed a hand to her chest. Her eyes widened as fear made the breathing worse. "I'm calling 911, Brooke said. "Wait, back up." Aria reached for her phone. Her fingers shook as she tapped the contact marked C. Brooke kept the emergency number ready while Aria told Caroline where they were. She did not pretend this was something she understood. Asthma had entered Aria's life during the years Brooke had been gone, and all the small decisions around it belonged to someone else's routine. Caroline arrived within 8 minutes carrying a backup rescue inhaler. She checked Arya, helped her use it according to the doctor's plan, and stayed beside her while the tightness eased. She spoke quietly, slowing the panic without suggesting that calm alone would fix the attack. When Arya could answer normally again, she leaned against Caroline. "She usually comes," she said to Brooke, "when this happens at school or practice." There was no accusation in it. That made the sentence harder. Caroline zipped the inhaler into the backpack. The regular one was left in her gym clothes. "I tried to tell you the backup was in my car." Brooke looked at the scattered school supplies on the table. "Not here." "I'm not trying to embarrass you." "Not here, Caroline." Caroline's face tightened. This is about whether she can breathe. Brooke felt the truth of it and hated that Caroline had said it. Outside, she watched Caroline help Arya into the car. Brooke had wanted one afternoon without instructions from the woman who had taken her place. Instead, her pride had kept her from hearing information her daughter needed. That night, Brooke sat on the residence steps until the cold reached through her shoes. Her anger had several targets, and not all of them were Caroline. She opened a message, erased it, and tried again. "Tomorrow, just the two of us. You're going to tell me everything about that night, including what you did not say in court." Caroline answered a minute later. "All right." Then a second message appeared. "Bring the T02 document you found." Brooke stared at the screen. She had never told Caroline she had found one. Caroline's house in Shaker Heights had a wide porch, warm windows, and a driveway cleared before the first snow arrived. A light glowed upstairs behind star-patterned curtains. Arya's room. Caroline opened the door before Brooke knocked a second time. "She's doing homework. She knows you're here, but she thinks it's about the visit report." "It isn't." Brooke followed her toward the kitchen. On the hallway wall hung a framed business certificate for Perkins Home Care Services, established in 2021. Lakeview had closed, Caroline had started a company, and the company had grown enough to help pay for this house. Brooke set her coat over a chair. "How did you know about T02? Caroline looked at the folder in Brooke's hand. "Because I remember you saying it the morning after the arrest. You said the charge came from the other terminal. Nobody wanted to hear you." "You remembered that for 6 years?" "Yes." "And still testified the way you did?" Caroline did not answer immediately. Brooke looked around the warm kitchen. "You built all this while I was counting commissary money." "I know how it looks." "No. You know how to say that sentence. You don't know how it looks from where I was." They sat at opposite ends of the table. Brooke began with Arya. She listed the medication Caroline carried, the school forms, the doctor's routines, the strawberry shampoo, and the bedroom upstairs. Then she asked the question she had been holding since the parking lot. "Did you take guardianship because you loved her or because she made you feel less guilty about what you did to me?" "Both things were there at first," Caroline said. "I'm not going to clean that up for you. When your mother died, I heard Arya had been placed with strangers. I requested information. I saw the reports from the first 2 homes. She kept a backpack packed beside her bed. She missed school. She would not sleep with the bedroom door closed. So you rescued her." "I applied. The county inspected everything. I took classes. I had to explain why I'd testified in your case." "What did you tell them?" "That I believed what I said was true." Caroline looked down. "And I did believe you were guilty then." Brooke's hand tightened on the table edge. "Guilt was part of why I opened the file," Caroline continued. "It isn't why I made her lunches for 3 years or sat in urgent care when she couldn't stop coughing. I kept her because I loved her. That does not make what I did to you smaller." Brooke placed the equipment inventory between them. T-02, Executive Office, S. Fox. "What time did your shift end that night?" "Midnight. I left around 10:20. The last transfer happened at 11:52. You were at the nurse's station. What happened after I left?" Caroline's fingers stopped moving around her cup. At about 11:30, a car pulled into the side lot. It was Stanley's. He used his key at the side entrance and walked toward his office. How long was he inside? About 20 minutes. The wall clock seemed suddenly loud. Did you tell anyone? Brooke asked. I told the prosecutor during trial preparation. Brooke's chair moved back an inch. You told him? He said Stanley was the director and had every right to enter the building. He said it would confuse the jury because there was no evidence connecting him to the transfers. By then, the audit showed your username, the refund looked corrected, and I had seen you at the computer. I accepted his explanation. You accepted the explanation that kept you out of trouble. Yes. I testified to what he asked. I did not volunteer the rest. Later, when I started wondering whether I had helped them build the wrong story, I told myself I had never lied. That was how I lived with it. Brooke stood and walked to the sink. She needed movement, even 3 steps of it. You saw him return before the final transfer, and you watched them tell a jury I was the only person there. I watched them tell the jury you were there. I let everyone assume the rest. That distinction kept you comfortable. It kept me functioning. It was not right. Caroline left the kitchen and returned with a cardboard archive box marked LV Archive 7. She placed printed accounting reports on the table, then removed a small external drive sealed inside an anti-static bag. Lakeview was liquidated 2 years ago, she said. My company bought patient lift equipment and office furniture. Several boxes came with the equipment by mistake. I reported the resident charts, and those were collected. These financial records stayed because nobody could identify who owned them. The drive was labeled as a server backup. And you kept it. I should have turned it over immediately. Why didn't you? Because I understood what it might show about the case and about me. Caroline counted the risks. My nursing license, my contracts, the guardianship review, my credibility if I admitted I had waited. I spoke to a lawyer. He told me not to access the drive and to document how it arrived. I documented it. Then I did nothing. For how long? 7 months. Brooke stared at her. Caroline pushed the box forward. Why now? Brooke asked. Because Aria called me from that diner, and you stood there thinking you had failed her. You did make a mistake with the bag, but you were missing 6 years of information that should not have been taken from you. A floorboard creaked above them. Aria stood halfway down the stairs in pajamas, holding an empty water glass. Are you going back to court? Caroline rose. Aria, come sit with us. Is somebody going away again? Brooke crossed to the stairs. No. You said court. We're trying to correct something from a long time ago. Does correcting it mean Aunt Caroline gets in trouble? Brooke looked at Caroline before answering. There may be consequences, but nobody is disappearing tonight. Aria's eyes filled, though she did not cry. Adults always say tonight when they can't promise tomorrow. Brooke stepped closer. No one is going anywhere, she said. I promise. Aria returned upstairs without filling the glass. Her door closed gently. At the front door, Caroline said, I'll testify. I know saying that now doesn't fix the delay. It doesn't. I'm still saying it. Brooke carried the archive box to the bus stop. Snow had begun as a few dry grains against her coat. Now she had work to do. Preserve the drive, verify the records, and prove where T02 had been. Her phone vibrated before the bus arrived. What does court mean? Aria had written. Are you sure nobody leaves? Brooke typed carefully. I'm sure I will keep coming back to you. We're working on the rest. She deleted the larger promise and sent the smaller one. It was one she knew how to keep. Findlay let Brooke use the repair shop's oldest computer after closing. Lock the back door when you leave, he said, and I'm not warning you away from the register. You already know more about it than I do. Brooke did not connect the drive to the shop network. She photographed the sealed bag, copied its label, and wrote down when Caroline had received it. The delivery records documented the drive's path from Lakeview's liquidation warehouse to Perkins' home care services. It did not prove the contents, but gave the evidence a history beyond Caroline's word. Using an offline machine, Brooke opened the backup. It contained 3 years of accounting activity. Most entries were routine, which made the irregular ones easier to isolate. Over 3 nights, she built a table of 23 fraudulent transfers totaling $90,400. Everyone used B. Wilson credentials. Everyone also came from T02. She checked again, then a third time. Her workstation had been T01. T02 was the terminal in Stanley's locked office. 17 transfers occurred when old schedules placed Brooke outside the building. Several were entered late at night, on Sundays, or on holidays. The final transfer was recorded at 11:52 p.m. after Brooke left and minutes after Caroline saw Stanley return. The duplicate $1,140 charge produced one more result. Its refund had been entered the day after Brooke's arrest, also from T02. At trial, that corrected refund had been used to make her reason for returning seem invented. The backup showed the correction came after she was already in county custody. Brooke sat beneath the fluorescent shop lights and pressed both palms to the desk. Relief came without safety. A backup could still be challenged. 6 years had taught her that knowing what happened and proving it in court were different jobs. The next morning, she met Connor Stokes, a post-conviction attorney recommended by a re-entry clinic. He read her summary, compared several raw entries with her chart, and asked where the drive had been stored. Caroline kept it at her business. The witness who testified against you? Yes. That will be attacked. He tapped T02 on the page. This is strong, but we need authentication. A digital forensics expert has to confirm the backup has not been altered. We need the liquidation records, the network map, and testimony about who controlled the office. Caroline will testify that she saw Stanley return. Will she admit she told the prosecutor and stayed quiet? She says she will. Her lawyer may advise against it. She could face a licensing review and questions in the guardianship case. She knows. Connor gave her the cost. His legal fee would be about $7,500. The forensic expert would require roughly $3,000. Payments could be staged, but screenshots would not support the motion. Brooke had $310 in her account. Start preparing it, she said. Connor looked at her for a moment, then nodded. I'll request the original case file and send preservation notices. You find the money, and stop handling that drive. To prove where T02 had been, Brooke requested her personnel records from the organization that had acquired part of Lakeview's archive. She was completing the form at reception when a familiar voice spoke behind her. Brooke Wilson. Stanley Fox wore a regional director badge and the same calm expression he had used during the audit meeting. I heard you were released, he said. I hope you're taking the re-entry process seriously. I'm requesting my employment file. Of course. He glanced at the form. Old records can be misleading without context. Brooke kept her pen on the counter. Stanley lowered his voice. People reviewing housing and custody want stability. Reopening accusations that were already decided may not help you. Your daughter has a settled life now. It would be unfortunate to disturb that while you're trying to prove you can be responsible. He could later call the words concern. Brooke wanted to ask about T02. Connor had told her not to reveal the evidence. She finished the form instead. Who controlled access to your office at Lakeview? Stanley's smile narrowed. I did. That was my responsibility. Then include the office access policy with my records. Outside, Brooke's hands shook while she waited for the bus. The warning was not proof, but Stanley had supplied one sentence Connor might need later. I did. That evening, Connor called. The expert's preliminary review found intact integrity markers and no obvious sign of alteration. A full report would require the original drive, supporting delivery records, 2 weeks, and payment. Caroline texted minutes later. Let me pay the expert. This evidence exists because I waited too long. I can at least cover that. Brooke turned the phone face down. On the bottom of her budget page, beneath rent, bus fare, food, and legal deposit, she wrote, extra accounting work. For 10 days, Brooke split herself between two lives. She worked at the repair shop from 8 to 6, cleared overdue invoices for a supplier at night, and counted warehouse inventory on Saturday. Each pay stub moved her closer to an apartment. Each extra dollar moved the drive closer to court. She slept on buses and kept legal receipts in an envelope inside her coat. Each night, before sleeping, Brooke checked the same 4 things: the apartment application, the legal envelope, Aria's visit schedule, and the photograph of T02 on the inventory page. The deadlines no longer felt separate. A missed shift could cost the apartment. A missed visit could cost trust. A delayed expert report could leave the conviction standing long enough for the county to treat it as fact. By then, every hour of work carried 2 prices, and every decision seemed capable of rescuing one part of her life by damaging another before morning came again. After 9 days, she had saved $1,700. The full cost remained more than $10,000. The housing deadline kept moving closer. Darcy connected her with a landlord willing to consider a small 2-bedroom apartment on East 71st if Brooke produced 4 pay stubs, an employer letter, and a deposit. Findlay wrote the letter. A grant might cover part of the deposit, but approval could take weeks. Brooke carried copies because offices lost the document that mattered most. On the 10th day, she collected a box of her mother's belongings from an older neighbor. Inside were 2 photographs, a scarf, a worn prayer book, and a thin gold ring wrapped in a handkerchief. Brooke held the ring for several minutes before taking it to a pawn shop. $900 is the most I can do, the owner said. Brooke thought of her mother correcting her whenever she confused keeping something with honoring it. She accepted the money and folded the ticket into the legal envelope. Thursday brought a required school meeting with Aria's teacher, Darcy, and both caregivers. It was scheduled for 4. At 2, the parts supplier called about a discrepancy that had to be resolved before an audit. The job paid $400, money Connor needed for the filing deposit. Brooke expected to finish by 3. Instead, she found a $2,000 shortage that traced back to a refund posted twice. A duplicate refund. The same kind of error that had sent her back to Lakeview 6 years earlier. She could not leave an open discrepancy in books she had touched, not with her record, and the owner already nervous about hiring her. She called the school, reached voicemail, and kept working. The second entry appeared at 4:22. Brooke printed the correction trail and caught the next bus. She reached the school at 5:30. The halls were empty. Aria's teacher waited near the office with a plastic folder. "We stayed as long as we could," she said. "Aria wanted you to see this." The folder held a family project. Aria had drawn 3 figures and labeled them Mom, Aunt Caroline, and me. A 4th space had been left blank for Brooke to complete during the meeting. "I called," Brooke said. "I know," but she watched the door for over an hour. The county response arrived the next day. Missing the meeting was added to Brooke's evaluation, and visits returned to fully supervised status pending review. No one had framed her. Stanley had not interfered. Brooke had chosen a financial problem over an appointment because unresolved money in her hands frightened her more than an official warning. The reason was understandable. Aria still experienced it as her mother not arriving. That night, a voice message appeared on Brooke's phone. "Mom, I'm not mad. I just made the project for you. Aunt Caroline came, but it was supposed to have you too." Aria paused. "I found old pictures where you and her were laughing. I love both of you. Is that against the rules now?" Brooke listened 3 times on the front steps. On the last replay, she stopped treating pride as the same thing as independence. Refusing Caroline's money did not punish Caroline. It delayed the expert, endangered the hearing, and made Aria wait longer inside a fight she had not started. Brooke called, Caroline answered on the second ring. Is Aria all right? I got her message. Pay the expert's fee. Caroline was quiet. I'm accepting it for the case, Brooke continued. Not as forgiveness. I'll cover Connor and the rest. Understood. And you will testify. Not just that Stanley returned. You'll say you told the prosecutor. You'll explain why you stayed quiet, and you'll answer what that did to me. Your lawyer may tell you to refuse. He already has. Are you going to? No. Caroline took a breath. I'll testify. The full forensic examination began Monday. Connor filed the post-conviction motion Wednesday with the documented chain of custody, Caroline's affidavit, Lakeview's liquidation records, and the network inventory placing TO2 in Stanley's office. The evidentiary hearing was scheduled for the 26th. Brooke's custody review remained set for the 29th, 3 days later. She placed both notices beside Aria's school project. One court would decide the conviction. The other would decide how quickly Aria could come home. Neither owed Brooke a clean ending. Courtroom 4C was 2 floors above the room where Brooke had been sentenced. The wood panels and fluorescent lights felt familiar enough to make her hands cold. Caroline testified first. Did you testify against Brooke Wilson 6 years ago? Connor asked. Yes. Was that testimony false? The part I gave was accurate. It was incomplete. Caroline described seeing Brooke at the accounting computer around 9:30. Then she described Stanley's car entering the side lot at approximately 11:30, his key at the side entrance, and his walk toward the locked office. He left about 20 minutes later. I told the prosecutor during trial preparation, she said. He said the director returning to his own building was not relevant without evidence connecting him to the transfers. I did not insist. On the stand, I answered the questions I was asked. Why correct the record now? Because it should have been complete then. I was afraid of admitting that I helped create a misleading picture. I was also afraid of what it could do to my license, my company, and my guardianship of Aria. The state challenged her motives. Caroline admitted she loved Aria, had felt guilty, and had delayed turning over the backup for 7 months. You benefit if Ms. Wilson is cleared, don't you? The attorney asked. My guardianship is already being reviewed, Caroline said. Clearing Brooke may make my life harder. It does not change which car I saw or which door Stanley used. Brooke testified next. She described the duplicate charge, her decision to return, and the difference between T01 and T02. Connor then introduced the first decisive record. The refund used at trial to discredit Brooke had been entered 1 day after her arrest, from T02. While Brooke was in county custody, the forensic expert authenticated the backup plainly. Its integrity markers matched the archived data. The metadata showed no later editing. The delivery documents tracked the drive from Lakeview's liquidation warehouse to Caroline's business. 23 unauthorized transfers totaling $90,400 had used B. Wilson credentials. All 23 originated from T-02. 17 occurred when schedules and available records placed Brooke outside the building. The final transfer was entered at 11:52 p.m. And where was T02? Connor asked. In the director's locked office. Stanley entered, looking composed. He denied returning to Lakeview and suggested Caroline's memory had changed because of her relationship with Aria. Connor began with questions that sounded harmless. How many terminals could access the transfer function? 2. T01 and T02? That was the numbering. Where was T02? My office. Who had a key? Only I did. Resident and personnel files were stored there. The office remained locked. No cleaning staff? They entered only when I was present. No night nurse? Certainly not. Connor lifted the report. Every fraudulent transfer came from T02. The refund used against Ms. Wilson also came from T02 after her arrest. You have testified that only you could enter that room. How did her credentials repeatedly operate from your terminal while she was away? Stanley looked toward the state's table. I cannot verify records found years later in a private business. The expert verified them. I'm asking about access. There may have been temporary keys. Maintenance sometimes needed entry. A moment ago, you said no one entered unless you were present. I said that was the policy. Policies are not always followed. So other employees could enter. It is possible. Then your statement that only you had access was incorrect. Stanley's jaw tightened. You are twisting ordinary operational details. Connor did not raise his voice. Did you return to Lakeview at approximately 11:30 that night? No. Who used the terminal in your locked office at 11:52? I don't know. A clerk typed into the silence. The judge reread part of the report and asked about the missing access logs and Stanley's earlier testimony. His answers narrowed each time. After a recess, the judge returned and spoke without a speech. The authenticated terminal data, the post-arrest refund, and Caroline's account created substantial contradictions in the evidence used to convict Brooke. The conviction was vacated. The record concerning possible fraud, suppressed information, and contradictory sworn testimony was referred to investigators. Stanley was not arrested in the courtroom. An investigator asked him to remain available and escorted him to a separate room for paperwork. His employer placed him on administrative leave later that day. Then the state announced it would not pursue a new prosecution on the existing evidence. Brooke heard the words, but did not move. Connor touched her sleeve and pointed to the back row. Aria sat beside Darcy in her blue coat, the silver bracelet visible at her wrist. Her face had gone still while she tried to understand the legal language. Darcy leaned close and whispered. Aria looked at Brooke and mouthed, "It's over." Brooke nodded. Outside on the courthouse steps, Aria ran to her without checking where Caroline stood. She wrapped both arms around Brooke's waist. "They said you didn't do it. They said the conviction can't stand. That means you didn't do it." Brooke held her. "Yes, I didn't do it." Caroline remained several steps away. She had testified, but the nursing board, her contracts, and the guardianship review still waited. Brooke was not ready to thank her, and Caroline did not approach asking to be thanked. In Brooke's coat pocket was the notice for the custody hearing 3 days later. The criminal court had corrected the record. The family court still had to decide what daily life would look like for Aria. The hearing lasted 15 minutes and erased nothing. The judge removed the requirement for fully supervised contact. Brooke would begin with unsupervised visits, move to weekend overnights after a home inspection, and complete an approximately 90-day transition. She had to maintain employment, continue the parenting program, and secure suitable housing. If the reports remained positive, Caroline's guardianship would end and primary custody would transfer to Brooke. 3 months once would have sounded like another sentence. Now Brooke recognized a schedule she could work through. On the courthouse steps, Aria held her hand and stared at the pavement. "When I move in with you, do I have to stop loving Aunt Caroline?" Brooke stopped. Caroline stood near the curb, giving them space. "No," Brooke said. "You don't lose someone who took care of you because you're coming home to me." "But what if it hurts you?" "Some parts will hurt for a while. That is for the adults to handle. It is not your job to choose." Aria looked toward Caroline and raised her free hand, calling her over. The three of them walked to the parking lot together. They did not look like a repaired family. They looked like people agreeing to the next step. Before the residence limit expired, the housing grant cleared and Brooke signed a 2-bedroom lease on East 71st. The radiator clicked all night and the view was mostly a parking lot, but Aria could sleep there. First came Saturday visits, then one overnight, then 2. Brooke learned the asthma plan from Aria's doctor and kept a backup inhaler where the written instructions required. Caroline provided school schedules without adding advice unless Brooke asked. Sometimes Brooke asked. Sometimes she learned after making a smaller mistake. Late in February, Aria arrived with 2 suitcases and a box of books. She inspected the second bedroom and announced that she wanted star-patterned curtains. "And this goes here," she said, placing a photograph on the dresser. It showed Aria and Caroline on a camping trip. Brooke adjusted the frame so it stood straight. "Here is fine." The answer still pinched. It no longer felt like surrender. Caroline received a formal reprimand from the nursing board for delayed disclosure and had to complete ethics training. Several contracts were reviewed, but Perkins' home care services remained open. Her guardianship ended without a fight. Aria continued seeing her on Wednesday evenings and called her Aunt Caroline. Brooke did not confuse that place with motherhood. Caroline stopped behaving as though daily competence gave her the final word. Connor later recommended Brooke to a small legal office that reviewed financial records in wrongful conviction cases. She began part-time, checking bank statements, shift schedules, terminal codes, refunds, and access records. Her notes were practical: confirm the machine, compare the time, request the missing log. At a winter school concert in late February, Brooke waited in the hallway with a grocery store bouquet. Caroline stood beside her, holding a thermos. They spoke about Aria's science grade and whether the roads would freeze before morning. Nothing was settled between them beyond what they were willing to do next. When the choir doors opened, Aria searched the crowd and found both women at the same doorway. She ran toward them, the silver bracelet moving against her wrist.
TO2 cleared Brooke's name. Aria's silver bracelet led her home. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Malric Coleman.